Welcome back to Switch to Linux. This is Tom. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go for about a month on mostly OpenSUSE for work and some media. Kind of the same thing that I did last month with the KDE and Mint. And I think that for me, the hardest part about this challenge is going to be I really like that KDE computer the more I use it. There's a little bit of bugs and challenges and things that are a little bit different than the Linux Mint, the Cinnamon edition I use for my basic work computer. And I got to say, as much as I love the KDE computer, it is not a computer that I think I would do most work with, at least in the current scope of how my workflow happens to be. I'm having, as I mentioned, a few issues with things freezing on or off. So I'm not 100% sure yet which desktop environment I'm going to run. And a lot of the reason for that, OpenSUSE is a little bit different in that you don't download a, you do not download a distro ISO image built with the particular desktop environment. So, for example, if I want to run Linux Mint and I want to run Linux Mint Cinnamon Edition, I just go to Linux Mint's site and I download the Cinnamon Edition. If I want to run the Mate Edition or the KDE Edition, like I was doing for about the past 6 weeks or so, then you go onto the Linux Mint's website and you download the distro which matches that particular in desktop environment that you want. So OpenSUSE is a little bit differently, where you download a ISO image that gets you kind of booted into the system, and then making sure you have an internet connection. Then the next step is you pick a lot of the various options and it will download the various sources that you need. So what our task is going to be is I've already downloaded the OpenSUSE Tumbleweed and I placed it on this drive, just a 4 gigabyte flash drive, and I'm going to be installing it on this drive, which is just a 32 gigabyte little tiny thumb drive, and literally on my computer I'll just have this plopped into the front drive here. Now this is a USB 2.0 drive. I shouldn't have any issues with this. I actually run my Ubuntu system, where's it at? This is my entire Ubuntu computer. Which runs perfectly. Now this is a USB 3 drive, but for a long time I operated it just off a USB 2 port. So I'm not envisioning I'll encounter any real issues. If I do encounter any such issues, then I'll go ahead and make some adjustments and maybe reinstall it onto another hard drive, as I have a couple of extra hard drives floating around here. But these are just way more convenient for me right now. I do have a USB 3 flash drive. If this happens to be too slow, I might use that flash drive first. Now this is a 32 gigabyte, and this kind of raises another fascinating point with modern computing, is how much space do you need? For a long time it was the bigger hard drive the better, and now we're getting to the point where our hard drives are getting smaller and smaller and smaller again. A lot of this is because we're moving to a lot of cloud-based sources. Now, I don't care for the cloud-based sources. I don't use them. But what I do have in my office is a NAS drive, where all of those things that you would ordinarily put on a cloud, I have on a NAS drive that is on yet another backup drive. So I can have a physical drive. In fact, if I really want good security, it's not that drive. Where's the other one? This is the other drive, which happens to, this is a Western Digital Ultra Passport 1 terabyte. Costs about 50 bucks for these. I can plug this into my current NAS drive. It detects that another drive has been plugged in, and it will make a duplicate of everything that's on my NAS drive on here, and I can go leave this at a friend's house. So if you want to know about extra safe storage, that's a good way to do it. But because of that, I'm not storing a lot of extra media on this computer, and so with that, I don't need anything much larger than this. I need something that can run my operating system, a few files here and there, nothing super major, because everything else is just accessed via network resources. So we're going to do that. Now, the next part is OpenSUSE has a couple options. They have the Leap option and they have the Tumbleweed option. I'm using the Tumbleweed option. Here's your critical difference between the two. So the Leap is kind of like the Ubuntu or the Linux Mint, where they have an LTS, or long-term support. And so what that means is that as you install the system, that they're not going to change any major packages, but they're going to support that system for a long period of time. Usually an LTS system runs support anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So this means that if you need a good stable computer, you build your LTS system, you make sure everything's working, and then you utilize the computer for the purpose without needing to experiment a whole lot. So you might do that if you're like doing OEM installs. Maybe you're building custom computers, making sure that they have a good Linux distro on them, and then selling those computers. You can easily do that. And LTS is the best option because an update may not mess anything up. Versus Tumbleweed is more of a rolling release method, is what they say. And so a rolling release means that as new packages become available and as new updates become available, and they're deemed to be stable by a community of support people, then they are going to roll those things out. And so you'll generally have a lot newer software, newer drivers, newer functionality on the rolling release than you have on the long-term support, but the long-term support may give you less challenges and have less issues over time. So for my basic setup, check out my video on a safer dual boot video, which will tell you how I'm doing my basic setup. So I'm using my desktop computer, which I have not pulled away from all of the wiring and everything. I don't want to mess with that today. Just gone under the table here. I've taken my screwdriver. There's 2 screws on the back of this. I pull off the side case. And then what I did here is I disabled now both hard drives. Now, when I did my safer dual boot, I ran all of the installation on the secondary hard drive. Actually, I had to plug the secondary hard drive into slot A to get it to work right with that particular distro. Hopefully, I do not run into any issues. I might. If I do, I'm going to have to reevaluate my plan and do something else. I'm not sure. This video is kind of pretty much live, although I'm going to test things in between as I cut the camera on or off. So basically, this computer system is set up in such a way that if I happen to put a thumb drive with bootable media on it, it will boot from that first. If I happen to not do that and I just turn the computer on, it will boot into Windows 8. If I want to boot off of any of the other operating systems on there, well, which in this case is only Linux Mint KDE, I put on the computer, I push the F12 key, get into the bootloader, and I can choose to install from that. I've been thinking lately, maybe I might just change the boot order to automatically install on the Linux Mint KDE because it's way better than Windows 8. I'll give you that. So with that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut the camera from here, and we're going to move the camera over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, which has my installation media. I'm going to plug this into one of the USB ports. And then I'm going to take this, which is my target media, and I'm going to plug it into the other USB port, utilizing the 2 front USB ports on the computer. And if I'm concerned that there might be some issues with the fact that those are probably on a shared device, I could move one of them to the back of the computer. It's just easier to get to both the front ones from here. So I'm going to take the video off now. I'm going to cut in with the camera on the screen over here so that we can get a better sense of what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and push the power button here on the computer, and I'm going to actually want to go onto the boot menu because the system's not quite sure where to boot into, and on my quick initial test, it tried to go onto the 32-inch target, or the 32 gigabyte drive, and that was not correct. So let's see. No, I think this is my challenge. It's detecting one of them and not the other, so I got a system boot. Okay, there we go. We got it this time. So here we're going to load up OpenSUSE, Tumbleweed, and the live disk is in KDE, which is the default for Tumbleweed here. And I walked through just the brief initial settings just so that I could see what settings I want to configure. I did everything just shy of pushing the install, so I don't run the install on the media a couple times. So this is going to take about a minute or so to load up, so I will be right back as soon as it is done. So we've turned the system back on. Now what I did do here is I moved the folder from up here in the corner where it defaulted to the middle, and I changed the background to this more distinct color because I could not read what was inside of the folder earlier. And it's just the coloration, while looking really cool on an HD monitor, it didn't look quite so hot on the system here with the webcam. Because to do these webcams here without doing a virtual box, I literally have to point a webcam directly at the monitor, so that's why it doesn't look quite as perfect. So we're going to go ahead and hit the install button, verify my disk is in there. And then what we're going to do here now, the test settings that I did might still be in here, but we're going to go ahead and double check. It did actually save my my background in a cache from last time I booted up the live key, but it does look like it's doing something different this time. So here it's what it's doing is it's detecting there's already an internet connection, and it's going through and it's downloading some basic repositories. So here is the extent of a license agreement that we have with OpenSUSE and Tumbleweed. And just like everything else, I'd highly recommend you read it. You will find that it is definitely a shorter terms of service as most other things these days. And so this is this is pretty much all there is. A lot of it is that this is a use system at your own risk. I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button. It's going to go through and do some network configurations. So there's two different network cards on this computer. There is a gigabit Ethernet, and there is a Wi-Fi adapter. We want to make sure everything's working off of the Ethernet port because, it's faster and I don't have to type in a crazy Wi-Fi password. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And, I didn't have to do any configuration. That's the cool part about Linux. This computer, as long as this computer was plugged into a wall, it automatically found internet no matter what. So here under install options, there's include add-on products from separate media. That's like if you have something downloaded on a disk or on a flash drive you want to install. We do not have any of those. I do want to add online repositories before installation though. What this adding the online repositories does is it will actually speed up your install, speed up your get ready time, because the install is going to have most of the updates implemented. Not all of them necessarily, but it's going to be a better option for us. So here I just want to, these are just some of the settings it's looking at. So SDC is actually the drive where this is going to be going on. So we have various, let's see, I'm just having a look at those. Boot settings there. Okay, so everything looks good. Here we're going to select where we're going with it. We're going to go onto the 30 gigabyte drive, which is, you can see, is the SDC. Verifying, yep, there's no partitions. The entire disk will be used for OpenSUSE. Yep, that's no problem. I'll go ahead and hit the next button. Here it's detecting our region and our time zone, so USA and Eastern time zone is correct. The hardware clock, UTC, this is generally good to add on. Now, one of the things I'll tell you if you are dual booting and whatever else is that if you do not change some of the UTC timings inside of the system files and you're dual booting between Linux computers and Windows computers, you may have some issues with the time clock being on or off. So right now it is reporting the correct time. 11:46 is what it says, and that's what time it actually is. Everything here looks good. We're going to go ahead and hit the next button. So here it's asking us which repositories, the main update repository, main repository, OSS, non-OSS, and then there's sources and debug. We're just going to keep the top three. You can research what each of these do and decide what you're doing. Since I'm doing a basic install of the system to test out the desktop for, for a week's time, then I'm going to just walk through with most of the defaults here. Just paying a little bit of attention to them just to make sure. So here we have another user agreement for the main repository. Again, you can see it's very short, actually readable in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and hit the next button. Okay, so here we are going to choose our desktop environment. You'll see that it defaults to the KDE Plasma desktop. We can also add the GNOME desktop. We can do a server, which is basically just no desktop environment. I don't want to do that on a work computer particularly. Unless I was building a web server, which, you know, web server, I don't want GUI. You know, if I'm doing a web server stuff, everything there is command line, and I like it that way. But this is actually going to be a work computer, a media computer. I'm going to expect to watch movies on it, get online, do a little bit of work, things like that. So I've looked at all these. I've used pretty much all these guys. I've not used Minimal X, and I've not used Enlightenment, but I saw some things about Enlightenment as an interesting desktop environment. So I'm actually going to pick that this time. I have no idea what I'm going to get into with Enlightenment. So this will be an experiment for us all, as it were. Go ahead and hit the next button. Now I need to create my usernames. I'm just going to do Tom. And for my password, okay. So we're going to use the password also for the system administrator. Automatic login. I'm actually going to turn automatic login off. Just because this, how I'm building this would be a portable Linux computer. I could actually take this to any other computer, plug it in, and have my entire desktop still with me. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the automatic login turned off so that in the event I do happen to travel with this key and it gets lost, somebody can't access what's on there. I'm not sure what's going to be on this eventually, so better safe than sorry in this instance. So now we're just going to have a look at what's going on. The only thing I'm looking at it up here that seems a little weird is, let's see, there's, okay, boot code. Okay, never mind. I saw that as bootloader, so we're good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hit the install button. Okay, so this guy here is this is the user agreement for Adobe Systems color profile. This would be a proprietary system that is allowed because of some of the earlier settings that we've done here. I'm going to say, sure, I agree with Adobe. GStreamer Fluendo MP3. I'm going to go ahead and hit agree on this one. I'm wanting to say Fluendo, and I never heard anything about this company until today. I thought I heard, I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, I thought I heard that they did some codecs things to give you kind of bad sounding codecs unless you purchase some. That might be a completely different company, and I totally forget the context. It was on a different video that I saw today about Ubuntu. So I'm going to examine that to see what happens. Okay, so we're going to confirm installation. We're going to say yes. So we are now starting the install. Now, at this point in time, this is probably going to take some time, and so I'm going to let this guy do its thing, and I'm going to come back as soon as it is done or close thereto. So we are about 11 and a half hours into this install, and it's kind of still going. So a couple of quick observations. Now, I've run many other Linux distros on a USB 2. I think, though, the USB 2 is definitely limiting me in this case. I think the difference is most of the other Linux distros that I've run on a USB 2 device have been devices that everything is already encompassed in the download ISO image. And as I'd said, OpenSUSE is a little bit different in that it basically has one basic ISO that you download, and then through an internet connection you do all of the other settings. So a consideration for you if you are working on this, well, first, don't use a USB 2. I'm reasonably sure that's the reason for my issue here. So if I actually notice performance issues on the system, then I'm actually going to make an ISO image out of the USB 2 drive, and I'm going to reflash it onto USB 3 drive so I don't have to install again. I'm going to see how it performs before I do that. Mostly because the USB 2 device I have here is very nice and small, and I like that. The other one's, you know, a standard bigger stick. And so there's that. The other factor, though, if you are looking at doing an OpenSUSE distro, is this thing's had to download about 3 gigs of data. So if you're on a slow internet connection or a metered internet connection, you really, really, really want to be cognizant that this is going to take a lot of bandwidth to download. Now, the reason I don't think that that's what my limitation factor is I can download a 1 gigabyte ISO image in about 20 minutes on my internet connection. So it is, like I said, it does look like it's going to take about 12 hours to finally get this installed, which is absolutely totally insane. I don't think it's a download issue, like I said, unless wherever it's downloading from is being metered, sourced, or whatever else. I could be downloading things off of slow servers. I did not have the option to choose where I'm actually downloading the information from. So I don't know if that's the limiting factor. I don't think that's the case, because I know the last time when I installed OpenSUSE on a virtual machine for testing, make sure the clock issue was resolved and a few other things, then it actually took, I want to say it took about 2 hours to install. So I don't think we're limited by our internet speed. I think we're limited by the write speed to a USB 2 device. That's what I think is taking so long. So point number 1 is make sure that you have the internet bandwidth to hold a 3 gigabyte file download, because that's about what's happening. In fact, it's down to 140 megabytes left. And you want to make sure that your read-write speed is pretty high. You know, installing this to an internal hard drive, it probably would have been done in about half an hour. Well, maybe, I'd probably say maybe an hour, hour and a half, just because of downloading all of the things, assuming that I'm not getting metered in my download speed. However, when I did a OpenSUSE install on a VirtualBox, it did take about 2 hours. So maybe that's about the speed that it would take. So those are just some thoughts. I'm going to be researching during this break here. It looks like it's going to take about maybe another half hour or so to finish up. I'm going to spend a little bit of time researching the Enlightenment desktop, because I've never seen it before. It'd be kind of fun to have a look at that. I think what we're going to do is, once this reinstalls and boots into the system, then I'm going to call this the end of this video. And then what we're going to do after that is I'm going to give it a couple of days, and then I'm going to come back with just some basic settings and basic setup items that I did on the Enlightenment desktop. So we'll pause out here, and I'll be back when we are ready to go. Okay, as I kind of said, I'm kind of doing this, I mean, somewhat edited, somewhat not. So right after I did the last video clip where I had like 30 minutes left, the entire system completely froze up right at 78%. And so definitely the problem is USB 2. Don't run this on USB 2. As I said, I've run several other distros on USB 2. Didn't think it'd be that big of a problem, but I put that out, and this was only like 20 minutes ago. I put the thing out, stopped it, restarted the boot on a USB 3 drive on a USB 3 port, and I don't think this has been running for more than about 25-30 minutes, and it is 81% complete. For reference, it was 78% complete after 12 hours on the USB 2, and it's telling me it only has like a minute and a half left. So what I will do here is I'm going to go ahead and slide the camera over while we're still recording, because it actually looks like it's going to be done in about a minute and a half. So it did indeed download. It was about 2.7 gigabytes is the size that I had noted before I had, you know, I wanted to look at that number quite a bit earlier, and so that's kind of that. So I'll be right back when this is ready to go. Okay, so we're working on the last little setup stuff here. There's looks like 94% doing some network configuration stuff here. So in all, after I restarted the install, actually this took about 30 minutes. Probably owing that it took twice as long on a virtual machine, probably because a fourth of the cores, VirtualBox ran on 2 cores. This computer actually is an 8-core system. Secondly, this machine is plugged directly into the router on high-speed internet versus the VirtualBox is on a machine that connects to the network with Wi-Fi only. So we got just a couple little steps here on the installation, and then if this is like most setups, then we will want to reboot the computer, and then we will be on, basically I'll shut it down, I'll take off the live key, and then I'll be running off of the external drive there. I'm going to go ahead and take this time while we're waiting, if it works, to hit the release notes button. Apparently it's not. I think it's just kind of in the last little pieces of configuration, so maybe I should have looked at the release notes earlier. You can probably find the release notes online as well. Okay, so it's telling me the system will now reboot. We're going to hit OK. And as soon as I see the computer do with its little flash on and off, I'll just pull the ISO key. I don't want to do that until it's ready to go. See if I might actually have to hit the shutdown button here. Shut down. Right. Usually shuts down a little faster than this. So that's one of the things I noticed with KDE in general, is that it is much slower starting and shutting down compared to the other systems I've used. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. Since I have this computer set to automatically boot into any USB drive that is on there, I don't have to mess with any of the F12 boot key or anything like that. It'll just go right into the new install. So let's see how long this takes to boot up. Of course, the big challenge in many instances is no operating system found. That's fascinating. I'm gonna shut this down and figure this out. Okay, so that actually took quite a bit longer than it should have to get booted into the system here. There seemed to be a problem with the default setting. Wanted to throw the record of the master boot log into the main system directory instead of in the master boot record, and so I went in and I changed the file structure from the default to ext4, and then I went in and had to change the setting to tell it to actually install the booting information on the master boot record rather than on the directory that it initially wanted to. So now we get to the startup screen, and it looks like, because of this background here, which is really cool on a computer, but it kind of messes up the screen so you can't see what's on the screen here as much. This I actually have to select which user I'm going to load the system into, and I'm hoping I should get rid of that other system. The initial user was the live CD key user. So here we're going to come in and do the initial setup. This is a desktop environment I have never seen before, and so I'm just going to get to the point where I have a desktop, and then the next video is actually going to cover what I did from here. So we're going to select US English on the keyboard, on the language, and then here we want to select what we're doing. We have a classic desktop, a dock, we have the standard Enlightenment, so we're going to do the computer standard Enlightenment. And And then now we're actually going to pick, so here I can pick which one of these sizes I want for my title bars. I think I kind of like this 1.5 here. That's a little too big. That's a little too small. I'm going to go with the 1.5. And focus whenever I'm going to do whenever a window is clicked. I'm not a big fan of things going all over the place just because the mouse moved. So I'm going to select that option there. I'm assuming I can mess with these keys later if I don't like the settings. So I'm just going to pick whatever the default is for there for now. Telling me to please wait. Go ahead and hit next on that. And it says there's an error trying to set the CPU power state. Okay, that's fine. And there's also a permissions error. I'm not sure what's up with these. So let's see. If that proceeds to be a problem for me, I'm going to go ahead and look into that a little bit later. Let me see if I can get the camera focused here. Actually, the desktop is really sweet looking here. Let's see if I can. Maybe if I focus, there you go. Focusing on the light bulb there actually allows me to get that. Actually, I could probably turn off autofocus on my system here as well. Let me, yeah, because I want to make sure I'm kind of over as much of the screen as possible. Turn off. Oh, turn that off, and whoa. There we go. Now I can do a manual focus there. All right. So here is, first time I'm ever seeing it, the Enlightenment Desktop. Let me back the camera up a little bit more here so you can see a little bit more what we got. So here I have this is actually my disk, which is running everything. I have a home directory, root. I have this little taskbar guy down here. This looks so totally awesome. I'm not sure how the computer runs, but man, does this look cool. First time I've ever seen this. Like I said, this looks like a desktop switcher, I'm assuming. So let me test that out. I'm going to boot up Firefox. And then let's switch. Once it's loading, I'll switch to a different desktop. Yep, so that's actually just a desktop switcher there. LeafPad, Yast. Terminology. Server not found. That's interesting. So it looks like I'm having an issue with the network card. So what we're going to do at this point is we have finished the install. It looks like I'm going to have to fight with us a little bit more. You know, these issues, like I said, it took me a good while to get the system actually configured and set up. I actually tried to reinstall it a few times because I had a problem with the master boot record was just not working right. And with the master boot record just not working right, I ran into another issue of the system. I couldn't repair the boot record either. It wouldn't install right. It gave me an error, and then I couldn't repair it either. And so I ended up having to just go through and rerun the entire installation once again. And then once I ran the entire installation again, then I was actually able to boot into the system. So now I'm actually going to turn this off, play with this configuration a little bit, and see what I can come up with. So the next video will probably be in a few days. It'll just walk through some of the different settings that I've done and anything else of that general nature. So this has been Tom, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.